Good day, everyone. Welcome to our lesson 5 in biology. Today, we will talk about cells. We all know that cells are the basic building blocks of life. Everything alive, from the smallest bacteria to the tallest tree, is made up of cells. In other words, cells are like the tiny pieces that make up all living things. Without cells, there is no life. So here are the learning outcomes. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to first, describe the structure and function of major cell organelles. When we say organelles, these are like mini organs or small organs inside a cell. So each organelle has a special job, like the nucleus, mitochondria, and ribosomes, and we will learn what they do and why they are important. Okay, then number 2, we have differentiate between plant cells and animal cells. And not only that, we also have prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. We will compare how plant cells, animal cells, prokaryotic cells, and eukaryotic cells are similar and how they are different. For example, plant cells have a cell wall and chloroplast, while animal cells do not. And then we have number 3, compare and contrast the cell membrane and the cell wall. We will also study the difference between the cell membrane and the cell wall. We both know that these protect the cell, but they are not the same. So think of it like this. The cell membrane is like a security guard. It controls what goes in and goes out. And we have the cell wall. It is like a strong fence, okay? And the cell wall gives shape and support of the cell. Alright, without further ado, let us proceed to the next slide. We have here the cell theory. Okay, this theory explains what cells are and why they are so important to life. Principle 1 states that cell is the basic unit of life. So what does this mean? This means that the cell is the smallest part of a living thing that is still alive. And we have principle 2, or the second principle says that all organisms are made of cells, meaning some organs are made of just one cell. We call them unicellular. Let me repeat that. Some organisms are made of just one cell, and we call them unicellular. Others, like plants and animals, are made of many cells or multiple cells. We call them multicellular. And then we have the third principle. It states that all cells come from cells. So this means that new cells are produced only from existing cells. Cells do not just appear out of nowhere. So in short, life comes after life. A new cell is always made by another cell. So remember that these 3 principles form the foundation of biology. They remind us that cells are not just small, they are essential. Without cells, there is no life. Okay, let's have the cell basics. Now that we know the principles of cell theory, let's look at the basic parts of a cell. Every cell, no matter how simple or complex, has 3 main components. The first part is the cell membrane. This is the thin covering that surrounds the cell. And we have discussed cell membrane in the previous lesson, right? And we know that cell membrane is the one controlling the materials that comes in and comes out of the cell. And not only that, cell membrane protects the cell and controls what enters and leaves. So think of the cell membrane like a security guard at the gate. It checks what can go in and what can go out. Next, we have the second part, which is the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the jelly-like fluid inside the cell where all the organelles are found. It helps transport materials and keeps the cell's shape. Imagine cytoplasm as the water inside a fish bowl. The fish represents the organelles which are moving around it and it supports them. Okay, so the cytoplasm is the jelly like fluid inside the cell while all the organelles are found. And then we have the term organelles. Organelles are the small structures inside the cell that perform specific jobs, and they are called mini organs or small organs. Each organelle has a unique function, just like the organs in our body. So think of organelles as the workers inside a factory. Each worker has a task, and together they keep the factory running smoothly. So remember, every cell has a cell membrane, cytoplasm, and organelles. These three are the foundation of cell structure. Now let's answer a very interesting question. Why are cells so small? At first, it might seem like size doesn't matter, but in biology, it matters a lot. Look at these cubes. Each one has the same total volume, but the surface area changes depending on how small the cubes are. The smaller the cubes, the bigger the total surface area compared to their volume. In simple terms, surface area is like the doors and windows of a house. It is where things can go in and out. Volume is like the space inside the house. If the house is too big but has only a few doors and windows, it's hard to bring things in or out. This is why cells stay small. A small cell has a large surface area compared to its volume, and this makes it easier to take in nutrients and oxygen and to remove waste quickly. In short, small cells work faster and better. If a cell gets too big, it cannot feed itself or clean itself properly. So, cells divide into smaller cells instead of just growing bigger. This way, they stay efficient and alive. So remember, small size means survival. Now, let's talk about the two main types of cells. The first type is called prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are the simplest kind of cells. They are known to be as bacteria. The word prokaryotic means before nucleus. Because these cells do not have a true nucleus. Okay, that's why they were called or also known as before nucleus. So, since it has no nucleus, what does this prokaryotic cell have? Instead of a nucleus, their DNA floats freely inside of the cell. So, in simple terms, their genetic material is like a loose thread inside the cell. Their DNA is circular. Unlike in complex cells, the DNA of prokaryotes is circular in shape. And then, in prokaryotic cells, no membrane-bound organelles are found, meaning they don't have organelles like mitochondria or chloroplast. And then, the ribosomes are present. Okay? They do have ribosomes, which are tiny structures that make proteins. These ribosomes are like mini factories inside the cells. They build proteins that the cell needs to survive. So prokaryotic cells may look simple, but they are very important. They include bacteria, which can be harmful, but also helpful. For example, some bacteria helps us digest food like lactobacillus, and the lactobacillus strains or probiotic strains that are found in Yakult, right? Alright, let's move on. The second type of cell is called eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cells are more advanced and more complex than prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are found in plants, animals, fungi, and protists. So, almost everything you see around you, like trees, dogs, mushrooms, even the tiny amoeba, are made of eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are complex. They are more complex than prokaryotic cells because they have many specialized parts. So think of them as a big house with many rooms, and each room having its own purpose, and that's why they are complex. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, and the nucleus stores the DNA. Their DNA is linear, not like the prokaryotic cells in which their DNA is circular. Remember, the DNA of eukaryotic cells are linear and not circular. Eukaryotic cells also have many organelles such as mitochondria, chloroplast, and the endoplasmic reticulum. So they have membrane-bound organelles. Uni or multicellular. So eukaryotic cells could be unicellular or multicellular. Eukaryotics can be single-celled, like protists, or eukaryotes can be multicellular, like plants and animals. Okay, so some are just one cell, but others, like us humans, are made of billions of cells working together. Okay, now let's focus on one of the most important organelles inside the cell. We call it the nucleus. The nucleus is often called the control center because it directs all the activities of the cell. The nucleus has a nuclear envelope. Okay, the nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear envelope, which is a double membrane. It has tiny openings called nuclear pores that act like gatekeepers, controlling what enters and leaves the cell. Inside the nucleus, we find chromatin. This is made up of DNA and proteins, and it contains the chromosomes that carry genetic information. There is also a darker area inside the nucleus called the nucleolus. Its main job is to produce ribosomes, which are needed to make proteins. So let's proceed to the next slide. Now that we've seen the nucleus, let's talk about what's inside it. It's genes. Genes are special sections of DNA that carry instructions for making proteins. To use these instructions, the cell makes a copy of the gene. This process is called transcription. During transcription, the DNA is used as a template to build a strand of messenger RNA or mRNA. So we have key details here. Remember that DNA template strand is the DNA acts as the guide or template. Then we have RNA polymerase. This is the enzyme that helps build the mRNA strand. And how about mRNA? The mRNA is the copy of the instructions which will later be used to make proteins. DNA stays safe inside the nucleus, while mRNA is the messenger that carries the the recipe to the cell's protein factories. So remember, genes are instructions, and the transcription is the process of copying those instructions into mRNA. This is the first step in making proteins, which are essential to life. Okay, let's proceed to the next one. Let's look at the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. The ER acts like the internal delivery service of the cell. After transcription, the mRNA leaves the nucleus through the nuclear pores. From there, it travels through the ER to reach the ribosomes. So the ribosomes on the endoplasmic reticulums are attached to the parts of the ER, and they are the ones that actually build proteins. Let me repeat that. Ribosomes are attached to parts of the ER, and they are the ones that actually build proteins. And this process is called translation. So, the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short, is not just a passageway, it is a transport system that helps deliver the instructions from the mRNA to the ribosomes, where proteins are made. Without the endoplasmic reticulum, the cell would not be able to move instructions efficiently, and protein production would slow down. That's why the ER is essential for the life of the cell. Now let's zoom in on a special part of the endoplasmic reticulum called the rough ER, or rough endoplasmic reticulum. It looks rough because it has ribosomes attached to it. The rough ER is responsible for protein synthesis. The ribosomes on the rough ER read the mRNA instructions and build proteins. Then we have protein shipping. Once proteins are made, the rough ER packs them into small transport vesicles that deliver them to the other parts of the cell. Then we have membrane synthesis. The rough ER also helps make parts of the cell membrane, including lipids and proteins. So the rough ER is essential for making, packing, and shipping proteins. Without it, the cell wouldn't have the proteins it needs to survive. This is what the actual endoplasmic reticulum looks like. We can see the circular structures there are the ribosomes, and the bluish with the pinkish structure is the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, let's look at the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, or smooth ER. Unlike the rough ER, the smooth ER has no ribosomes on its surface, so it looks smooth under the microscope. The smooth ER is responsible for the creation of lipids. So it makes lipids, including hormones and parts of the cell membrane. It also breaks down carbohydrates. Okay, so the smooth ER breaks down carbohydrates into simpler sugars, especially in liver cells. In liver cells, the smooth ER detoxifies harmful substances, making them less dangerous. So it detoxifies drugs and poison. So while the rough ER is busy making proteins, the smooth ER focuses on making lipids, okay, breaking down sugars or carbohydrates, and detoxifying drugs and poisons. And all of these are essential for the cell's survival. Now that proteins are made in the endoplasmic reticulum, they need to be processed and sent to the right place. This is the job of Golgi apparatus. The Golgi is like the post office or mailroom of the cell. So here are the functions of Golgi apparatus. Modifications. What do you mean by this? Proteins and lipids from the endoplasmic reticulum arrive at the Golgi where they are modified. Sometimes sugar are added or shapes are adjusted. Then we have storage. Some products are stored in the Golgi apparatus until the cell needs them. Then we have shipping. Other products or materials are packed into vesicles and shipped to their final destination, either side the cell or outside. What I mean, their final destinations either inside or outside of the cell. Then we have ID tags. The Golgi can also add special chemical tags to proteins, which act like addresses to make sure they reach the correct location. Polarity of the Golgi. The Golgi apparatus has two sides. The cis side, which is the receiving side, and the trans side, which is the shipping side. Okay, so in simple terms, cis means this side where things come in. On the other hand, trans means across. Okay, trans means across where things go out. So the Golgi apparatus is the sorting and shipping center of the cell. It makes sure every protein and lipid is modified, labeled, and delivered to the right place. Under the microscope, this is how the Golgi apparatus looks like. Now, let's look at lysosome. This organelle is like the clean-up crew of the cell. It helps the cell digest, recycle, and even control when a cell should die. Lysosomes are membrane-bound. Lysosomes are surrounded by a membrane that keeps their powerful enzymes safely inside. Lysosomes can break down food particles or bacteria that enter the cell. They also recycle worn-out parts of the cell, breaking them down so the materials can be reused. In some cases, lysosomes help trigger programmed cell death, which is important for growth and development. So, lysosomes are the digesters and recyclers of the cell. They keep the cell clean, healthy, and balanced by breaking down waste and recycling materials. Now, let's move on to the next. Under the microscope, this is how a lysosome actually looks like. Next, let's look at the vacuole. A vacuole is a large sac inside the cell. Vacuoles are formed from the ER and Golgi apparatus. it serves as a storage and support structure. So think of the vacuole like a storage warehouse inside the cell. It keeps food, water, waste, and even colors. So, what is the function of vacuole in plants? In plant cells, vacuoles store important materials like proteins and seeds. It also serves as disposal site. They also act as disposal sites for harmful molecules. Vacuoles can store pigments that give plants their colors, like the purple in flowers or the red in fruits. Then, in terms of support, when filled with water, the vacuole helps keep the plant rigid and upright. How about the function of vacuole in protists? In protists, vacuoles can pump out water or can pump out extra water to prevent the cell from bursting. So it's like a water pump that removes too much water. Then we have contractile vacuoles. These special vacuoles contract to push water out of the cell. So the vacuoles are versatile. They can store, clean, color, and even pump water. Each organism uses its vacuole in its own special way. Under the microscope, this is how the vacuole looks like. Now, let's look at the mitochondrion. This organelle is often called the powerhouse of the cell because it produces the energy that the cell needs to survive. So think of mitochondria like the power plants of a city. They generate the electricity that keeps everything running. So the structure of the mitochondria consists of double membrane. So mitochondria have two membranes, an outer membrane and a highly folded inner membrane. The folds are called cristae, and they increase the surface area for energy and production. Mitochondria have their own DNA, which means they can make some of their own proteins and ribosomes. Mitochondria are where cellular respiration happens. This is the process of breaking down sugars and fats to release energy. Then in terms of energy transformer, they transform the energy from food into ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that powers almost all cell activities. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is like the battery that runs the cell's machine. So, mitochondria are the power plants of the cell. They take in fuel, break it down, and produce ATP, which is the energy currency of life. Under the microscope, this is how a mitochondrion looks like. By the way, mitochondrion is the singular term, while mitochondria is plural. Now, let's look at the cytoskeleton. Just like our bones gives us shape and support, the cytoskeleton gives the cell its structure and helps it move. So think of the cytoskeleton like the scaffolding and roads inside the cell. It holds everything in place and also provides pathways for movement. The cytoskeleton is made of tiny fibers called microtubules. Okay, tiny fibers called microtubules, which form a network throughout the cell. So these microtubules, it's like a web of ropes holding the cell together. Remember, let me repeat that, cytoskeleton is made of tiny fibers called microtubules. In terms of function, we have structural support. So it helps the cell keep its shape and prevents it from collapsing. Then we have change cell shape. The cytoskeleton can rearrange itself, allowing the cell to change shape when needed. Then we have cell movement. It also helps the cell move, either by moving the whole cell or by moving parts inside the cell. Then we have the terms cilia and flagella. Structures like cilia, and as what we can see in the picture, it has tiny hair-like projections. And flagella, as what we can see in the picture, it has a whip-like tail. Cilia and flagella are made of cytoskeleton parts, and they help cells move or sweep materials. Cilia are like brooms sweeping things along, while flagella are like a propeller pushing the cell forward. So, the cytoskeleton is more than just support. It's the framework, the mover, and the transporter of the cell. Now, let's look at the chloroplast, found only in plant cells and some protists. This organelle is the site of photosynthesis, the process that turns sunlight into food. In terms of structure, chloroplasts are surrounded by two membranes, or it is double membrane. This membrane protect and organize the organelle. Then we have stroma. The stroma is the fluid inside the chloroplast where important reactions take place. Then we have grana and thylakoids. Inside the chloroplast are stacks called grana. Grana made up of disc-like structures called thylakoids. These contain chlorophyll, the green pigment that captures light. The thylakoids are like pancakes stacked together, and the chlorophyll is the green paint that absorbs light. In terms of function, chloroplasts carry out photosynthesis using sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to make glucose. They transform light energy into chemical energy stored in sugars, which the plant can use or store for later. So, chloroplasts are the solar panels and kitchens of plant cells. They capture sunlight and cook it into food, making life on Earth possible. So, under the microscope, this is the actual image of chloroplast. Now, let's compare the cell membrane and the cell wall. Both of them act as boundaries, but they are not the same. Let's just recall cell membrane. All cells have cell membrane, and we can find it both in plants and animals. And remember, the cell membrane is like the security guard at the entrance. It decides what goes in and goes out. Cell membrane acts like a boundary. It forms a thin, flexible boundary around the cell. And I hope you can still recall in the previous lesson that the cell membrane is made mostly of phospholipids, which allow it to be flexible and selective. Now, how about the cell wall? Cell wall is only unique to plants. The cell wall is found only in plants, not in animal cells. It provides strength and rigidity, helping plants stand tall. So it's like a concrete wall that keeps the plant upright. The cell wall is made of cellulose, the same material that makes up wood. So, the cell membrane is the flexible gatekeeper found in all cells, while the cell wall is the rigid support structure found only in plants. Together, they protect and support the cell in different ways. To help us remember the organelles and their functions, scientists and teachers often give them nicknames. These nicknames make it easier to connect the organelle's job with something familiar. Mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Why? Because they generate energy just like a power plant provides electricity for a city. Next is the vacuoles. Vacuoles are the storage room or storage bin. They store food, water, and waste just like a storage room in a school. Golgi apparatus. The nickname of it is post office, warehouse, traffic police. Why? Because it sorts, modifies, and shapes proteins, just like a mailroom or warehouse that organizes and delivers packages. Next, we have lysosomes. The nickname of lysosomes are the following: suicidal bag, disposal unit, and demolition squad. So they break down waste and recycle materials like the garbage collectors or demolition team of the cell. And then how about the nucleus? It is known as the control center or brain of the cell. Why? Because it holds the DNA and controls all activities, just like the principal's office runs the school. And we have nucleolus. Nucleolus is known as the little nucleus. So nucleolus makes ribosomes like a small workshop inside the principal's office. Then here are more fun nicknames of organelles. We have the cell membrane. The nickname is screen door or gatekeeper of the cell. The cell membrane is like the screen door. It lets some things in and keeps the others out. That's why it's called the gatekeeper. How about the ribosome? Ribosomes are also known as protein factories or pallid granules. Ribosomes are the protein factories of the cell. They follow the mRNA recipe to build proteins. Then we have ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is known as the energy currency of the cell, meaning ATP is the money of the cell. Just like we use money to buy things, cells use ATP to power their activities. Chloroplast is known as the kitchen of the cell. Chloroplasts are the kitchens of plant cells. They cook food using sunlight through photosynthesis. Thylakoids, they are known as baggy trousers. Thylakoids are stacked like pancakes inside chloroplasts. Their nickname, baggy trousers, comes from their folded, layered look. Endoplasmic reticulum are known as highway or transportation system. So the ER is like the highway system of the cell, moving materials from one place to another. So these nicknames make organelles easier to remember. Whether it's the screen door, the kitchen, or the highway, each organelle has a role that keeps the cell alive and working. Now, in this slide, we have the complete organelles found inside a plant cells. And in this slide, we have the complete parts found inside an animal cell. So I will just leave it to you. I have also uploaded this image in our Google Drive. So please read them and familiarize each part. Okay? And animal cell as well. I have uploaded it in our Google Drive. But before we end, let's compare plant cells and animal cells. Okay? So plant cells and animal cells are both eukaryotic, meaning they have a nucleus and organelles, but they also have important differences. So plant cells have a rigid cell wall made of cellulose, which give them the structure and support. So this cell wall is like a brick wall that keeps the plant standing tall. And plant cells also have chloroplasts. So they contain chloroplast, which captures sunlight for photosynthesis. And then the vacuole of plant cells are large, so they have a large central vacuole. Plant cells have one big vacuole that stores water and helps keep the cell firm. How about the animal cell? Animal cells only have a flexible cell membrane, so they can take on many shapes, but they do not have cell wall like plant cells. Then, animal cells do not have chloroplast. They cannot make their own food, so they rely on eating other organisms. Okay, remember, animal cells do not have chloroplast, so animal cells cannot make their own food. So the vacuoles of animal cells are small. Okay, animal cells may have small vacuoles, but not the large central one found in plants. How about their similarities? Both plant and animal cells have a nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, and cytoskeleton. So in simple terms, plant cells and animal cells share the same basic parts or basic organelles, but plants have few extras for making food and standing tall. So again, let me repeat, plant cells have cell wall, they have chloroplast, and large central vacuole. While animal cells, they do not have cell wall, no chloroplast, and they have small vacuoles. But the rest of the basic parts like nucleus, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, and skeletons, they share these basic parts. But then again, I want you to study and read all of the parts and functions of a plant cell and as well as the animal cell. So the main difference is that plant cells are built for structure and food making, while animal cells are built for flexibility and movement. Both, however, are eukaryotic and share many of the same organelles. Alright, thank you so much for watching and listening. Good luck, dear students. This is the end of lesson 5 and I hope you've learned a lot. Now that we're done with cells, you will be required to enter the summative exam. Best of luck and you can do it!